Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is one to suck the blood and life out of you. A vampire tale that I found on Reddit, No Sleep, and I think you guys are going to really enjoy this. As I mentioned in the previous video, there was supposed to be a second werewolf story. There's been some errors and problems with the editing, so I do apologise for that, but I will upload that tomorrow. Without further ado, let's get into tonight's vampire story entitled My Life Stories as a Vampire, Part 1. My human life was nothing of importance or relevance for that matter. I was but a simple commoner in an ever-growing world. On that note, I suppose I should start at the beginning of my descent into immortality. You may refer to me as Nevin. I had just turned 22 in the year of 1863, before the government approved the conscription in the United States. Shortly after, I left my home that held my drunken father, whom did not bat an eye to my departure, and set off into an absolutely terrifying experience. I did not last, unfortunately, as I was caught up in a skirmish and left for dead with fatal wounds planted in my torso and upper left thigh. It felt like weeks that I slumped against that oak tree, months that I contemplated my purpose and the meaning of it all, years that I had shown the extent of mankind's worth, thrown into enemies of the same species for the luxury of calling grassy fields your own and no one else's. But in reality, mere hours had passed before she arrived. To describe a vampire through mortal eyes is a battle words cannot defeat, but it was truly a spectacle of amazement and utter terror that my near-dead consciousness could still comprehend. It isn't too different from stepping foot in a country thousands of miles from your own home. The sights you see in front of you, beautiful buildings, exquisite rooftops, roadways paved with materials you've never heard of, and the very same sun, the one you've seen every morning of your life, bestowing a boundless and awe-inspiring drop of perfection into every inch of this new world. These things exist where you live, and despite being similarly structured, they show a unique beauty that can't be matched. That is what gazing upon a vampire entails. The shape and form of humans that you've conversed and traded glances with all your life, but different in a magnificent and overwhelming way. Her long hair was an indescribable mixture of ebony and crimson, and the very grass she approached lowered itself without the aid of her step. Kneeling beside me, she gently caressed my forehead down to my chin, as a mother would her sickly child. It was then I met the gaze of her eyes. Fluctuating yellow irises swirled around her pitch black pupil, that of which dispersed about like shadows desperately trying to escape from a cage. "Are you the devil?" I asked her. Her expressionless face shifted to a sinister smirk with a tilt of the head. "Quite." Her voice was deep, not a masculinity but a presence and control. Both comfort and fear consumed me as she placed the nail of her finger on my chin, lifting it ever so slightly as if to look me over. After a while, she then decided I was what she was searching for. I felt her small weight push on my body as she leaned into me, setting every nerve on my chest wound into an intense competition of never-ending flame and impossibly sharp blades. But before I could scream, she lightly bestowed a short breath into my ear, sending a deep chill into my blood, turning everything soothingly cold while numbing my wounds completely. At first, I thought this feeling was death, and I suppose in the end, I wasn't far off. She looked me in the eyes again with her monstrous orbs of unspeakable beauty, now pulsing with desire. I grant you, perish here and forever be lost, or accept my gift and serve me until the very end, till this realm of life is set ablaze by the culmination of everything that is and will be. Every word she spoke was calamitous melody that rang through not only my ears but soul as well, building a feeling of both darkness and warm anxiety in the pit of my chest. While I may personally think it was minutes, in reality I'm positive it was mere seconds before I closed my mouth and let out a fearless breath through my nose, my nod of the head sealing my fate. Her eyes grew wide as her mouth opened in a smile, letting an inhuman moan ring out into the cool dark air as she glided on top of my body. She aggressively tore her cloak down the middle, exposing her breasts mere inches from my face before opening the flap in my clothing below her waist. Her young, perfectly formed body and frenzy-like shifting granted her my seed within minutes, as she then slit open her pale wrists and placed it upon my dry lips. The titillating heat in my body of all that was happening transformed the warm liquid into life itself, and I couldn't get enough of it. Before long, the flowing blood wasn't enough, so I viciously grabbed her arm and began sucking with every ounce of strength I had. And oh, how I remember that bliss, the first kiss of death, the very breeze of the night tantalizing my body with infinite euphoria. When she retreated her arm from me, I desperately grabbed and reached for more, as the moment I stopped drinking, I felt everything go cold, and not long after, unspeakable pain. Falling onto my stomach from foot of the tree, I pushed and crawled through the icy grass, trying to beg for everything to stop as the feeling of branded scissors cut at every cell in my body. No words escaped from me, only my endless screams and tears as I felt my cheeks grow unspeakably heavy while any and all oxygen refused to enter my body. I flipped over, mouth open and eyes wide, as I looked towards the moon before death finally took me. Though I didn't stay dead for long. I drew a breath out of habit, not necessity, and blinked towards the star-filled blackness above. Sitting up, I saw my wounds from the skirmish were completely erased from my pale form, and looked upon my hand to see devilish nails replacing the previous inhabitants. Closing my fists, I looked around and saw everything differently, but yet the same. It's impossible to explain, but think to yourself the clarity and ease that the sunlight brings you during the day, and the uncomfortable, outreaching darkness that attacks your senses during the night. Upon opening my eyes as a vampire, these were flipped entirely, and I couldn't have felt more at home. I stood to see her leaning against a dark tree, gasping from pain and holding her wrists to keep the blood inside. Amidst her heavy breathing, she spoke those icy words with a satisfied smile. Let's experience that bliss again. Together we'll feast upon your enemies. If I had a heart, it would have been beating with excitement as I smiled with her, my subtle fangs gracing the flesh on my lips. That night, she taught me how to hunt, as I slowly discovered what my new body could do. We are by no means monsters of the night, and what we did that night was very unsavoury and downright stupid. But I was born anew, and I was hungry. One by one, we picked off the Confederate soldiers who almost took my life, snapping their now fragile necks with my new found strength. It wasn't until there was one left that I took my time. Everything felt so alive. The nature around us, the sounds of the night, it all fueled this overpowering flame that dwelled within me. I do not know his name, but I know that upon my slow approach, the young man fell to the ground with shaking knees, attempting a frantic crawl away, while forever maintaining his gaze upon me, as if simply blinking once would invite me to strike. But that's when she gently touched the ground behind him, kneeling beside him while hushing him gently. I witnessed it for the first time, the true power of the vampire. He slowly relaxed. His heartbeat's frantic attempts of adrenaline ceased to be, as she moved her face close to his. Comfort, trust, seduction. Not mind control, not a spell, but an art that we embrace as our weapon of obscurity. Lack of human ambiguity is what has always and will make us the deadliest predator alive. As they met lips, she whispered false securities. I knelt beside him. Every sense I own embraced the flow of blood in his veins. I could hear the consistent movement like a river, see the pulsing skin subtly protruding, feel the balanced beat of what brings him life upon my touch, smell the rich aroma that bestowed me such quintessential contentment from her wrist, and finally taste that oh so pristine fluid of life as it endlessly poured into my body. With each swallow, I felt his body grow more limp, until he started gasping at an intense pace. His heartbeat quickened, and more blood came flowing to me as I quickly lost my mind of pleasure. I begged in my mind for him to continue fearing for his life. Yes, please give me more. I was clutching him close, my left hand bending his head to the side more and more as my right held onto his clothes, pulling him closer. Anything to give me more. Then, as his gasp began to slow, I felt the rush of blood sedate, and my passionate frenzy of intense pleasure begin to die down. Once I began sucking as hard as I could for the last drops. She pulled me away, for I am sure most of you know, drinking blood when the heart has completely stopped is a most awful experience. He dropped dead shortly after. She then reminded me that I was hers and that she now carried my seed in her body, as if it were a pact that connected us. I now know that vampires of her ancient age simply prefer ceremonies of intercourse before the transformation, as it holds no actual meaning. But back then, I was ignorant of my kin's customs. So, my belief was that I really was tied to her in an inseparable way, which, in the end, became her downfall. Leaving the corpses behind us, I was on my way to once again an absolutely terrifying experience. But this time, I felt a passion and a lust for what was ahead, and I knew this is what I was meant for. It's been such a long time since that day. I had to really close my eyes and bring back all the feelings I had during the meetings of my maker, along with my first kill. But, not unlike a first kiss, they aren't easily forgotten. I grant thanks to anyone who chooses to indulge my expression of self-isolation that are through these journal entries. Many of my kind have chosen to do the same before me, but I believe I am the first to reach out with those and the use of technology. I have many things to share with those that will listen, not only disclosing my own stories, but those of my fellow kin that I've had the fortunate and unfortunate honour of meeting with. I doubt I will be as specific in my next journal entry, and will instead go over anything substantial that happened during the short time with my mistress. I also won't explain how us actual vampires are in comparison to your beliefs in a plethora of useless blathering. I'd rather explain that as I go along, since I promised stories instead of dull explanations. If you desire answers for a question that piques your interest, either with what transpired here or not, do not hesitate to ask. I likely will not respond directly, but will gladly grant an answer on my next entry if the question is worth such an effort. Travel safely in the night. Until next time. Wow. I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I absolutely love vampire stories. If you have any vampire stories, whether they're true or fiction, please do send them over to me, guys. You know the email address, deadmantalking666@gmail.com. Please let me know in the comments below. Please do like and share. And remember, folks, be safe, not sorry.